Hello, I'm Tara Ruckman.
And I'm Stephanie Howe, and we are Control the Chaos EDU. Are you burnout? Are you feeling frustrated or overwhelmed?
Or maybe it's the opposite and you're a go getter and want to level up. Then it's time to dive in with real talk and solution focused conversations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Control the Chaos. Today, we have someone who has taught me so much just about video, YouTube, recording, engagement of adult learners, and I've got to watch him firsthand. So I'm so excited about today's guest. What about you, Tara?
Oh, I am so excited. This is the first time we've gotten to meet, and I'm already learning something new. Like, they're getting ready to start school in June. That's so exciting. I mean, that's not heard of. Like, we have still people that are just getting ready to end school. So I'm really excited what we have to offer today in our podcast.
I know it's kind of crazy thinking about the Philippines and how the world is so different. Like we are on summer break where they're getting ready to start their year so soon. But it works out, right? And they get to learn from us. We get to learn from them. So it all works out. So today we have Franco, who is an amazing educator who has a YouTube channel that inspires multiple different educators from around the globe. I know I have tuned in during different times to learn from all of the amazing educators and speakers and who he has. And so I am so excited to bring on Franco. And Franco, feel free to let us know a little bit more about yourself and your YouTube channel that you kind of talk about.
Thank you, Steph, and thank you, Tara, for this invitation. I'm glad to be here at Control the Chaos podcast. And again, for all the listeners and viewers of our session for today, I'm Franco Adun from the Philippines. I'm a junior high school teacher. I'm teaching history in junior high school. And I put up a Facebook page called Kaagapay Teacher Support. Basically, we conduct pre-training for teachers. We have so far conducted, and I'm really proud of it. We have conducted around 200 episodes of teacher training. And I also have a YouTube channel. That's where we actually live stream all our episodes. And so you can actually visit our YouTube at www.youtube.com/c.franco-nicolo-p Adun. So that's me, Steph, and Tara.
That's pretty impressive numbers there, over 200. That's amazing. Where do you get time to do all of that?
Well, definitely, it's really a sacrifice. I work in the day, and usually because I'm fully employed, I'm teaching full time. Also teaching in a university here in the Philippines. So I do all the teacher service work in the at night and into the morning. So usually I have like 3 to 4 hours of sleep to be able to do all of those things. But it's so worth it. Teachers are definitely learning a lot from our platform, and we are able to help a lot of schools here in the Philippines.
Yeah, and what I love about your YouTube channel is how interactive the chat is. It is not a quiet chat. I remember I've presented twice, and it's been so much fun. I'm just thankful for those opportunities. And the chat, I'm like, I cannot keep up. But Franco has an amazing team that is like answering the questions as I'm presenting, and I'm just like watching it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So you just really know how to engage your audience and invest in what they need to know and make those relationships. And that's what I think I really appreciate about you and your work that you do. It's all about relationships. It's all about that differentiation, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Steph.
And so our first kind of question is, we want to know, what are your top 5 engagement tips when it comes to engaging maybe students or adults? What are those 5 tips that you do?
Well, definitely there are 5 on. Well, there are many ways, no, and many things to consider when you want to engage your audience, be it adult or students. Okay, although definitely there are differences in terms of like approach. If you are like training teachers, I do approach it differently whenever compared to when I'm teaching in the classroom, when I'm faced with grade 7 or grade 8 students. But on top of all of those approaches and considerations, I have top five tips for our teachers, okay, that we can consider. The first one is definitely differentiated learning design. So regardless if it's adults or students or young students you're handling, okay, differentiated learning design is always the way to go about it. Okay. Second is contextualized learning design. This is very, very important for me as a teacher, especially whenever I design my lessons, okay, my instruction, my assessments, that they're always contextualized. And of course, authentic tasks and assessments. This is a 21st century trend for tasks to be more authentic, more real life setting assessments or instruction. And of course, technology infused instructional materials. This is one of my strengths as an instructor, Steph and Tara. I make sure that all my designs are all technology infused, if as much possible, to be able to connect to the 21st century learners. And that includes also the adults that I'm handling with. And of course, at number 5 would be building rapport and establishing connections, Steph and Tara.
Thank you so much. So, starting off, you said differentiated learning. That was number one that you were listing. That is very interesting to me because I come from a special education background. So, differentiated learning is what I would do all the time and every day throughout the day. So, can you tell us a little bit about your differentiated learning design?
Thank you so much, Tara, for that. No, and I think when we talk about differentiated learning, it's actually driven by one idea, which is our students are unique. We cannot like have a student of 20 of 20 in a classroom and think that all of them actually learn the same way. Okay, although for the longest time, okay, in a traditional setup, we thought that's actually the way to go about it. Okay, but we realize in the 21st century that our students are really different in different ways. They perceive things differently. They acquire things differently. They understand things differently, and therefore, differentiated learning comes in the picture in order to really address these differences. Okay, so when we think about Tara, no, and Steph, when we think about differentiated learning design, you're actually looking at three components of instructional design, which is basically your content, your process, and your output. Okay, so when you think about first content, no, well, people would say, how do you differentiate content in a class or in a class? Do you give them different content per student? Actually, no. Okay. One of the things when you want to differentiate content, for example, is how to access content. There are different ways for students to access content. Maybe one person access content via the web, if they are web savvy, or maybe a student is more text-based learner. So you might want to give materials and or your instruction or your content delivered in text materials. Okay, sometimes could be video or audio materials. Okay, so here you're actually providing your students different ways to access the same content. So they'll be learning the same content, but they'll be accessing the content differently. Okay, even the pacing, for example. That's one of the things that we learned here in the Philippines when we entered into the pandemic school year. We realized that giving your students, okay, their own pacing and timing of access to the information sometimes actually help. Okay, and allows them to digest the information better. Unlike, for example, in the classroom when you deliver a content and that's it already. Okay, you can also talk about a differentiation in process. Okay, how do you engage your students to process the information? Okay, in my case, Tara and Steph, we use here in the Philippines, in our department, in social science department, we use based approach in delivering our content in social science, in history. Okay, so we basically ask a lot of questions in the classroom. We keep on allowing our students to critically digest a certain information. Okay, and we also allow them to ask questions in the classroom. Okay, so that's basically the essence of an inquiry based approach. So it's not always like the teacher talking or delivering the content. Okay, you can also like approach it differently. We could also say that to some extent, the PBL is a different way of approach to to process your instruction. Okay, so you can also look at that way, and of course, output. Okay, we should also realize that it's no longer like the paper pencil tests that we used to grew up before. The multiple choices that we can assess the student learning or the student outcome. We can always look at different formats like in writing. Of course, when we talk about Google, we have like Google Docs to facilitate text assessments. Okay, and of course, other format like audio, video, and even portfolio assessments. Case via Google Sites, of course. Since I'm really in love with Google Workspace for education tools, and of course Google Sites is one of my favorites. Okay, so that's basically Tara, no, and how we go about differentiating the learning design for our students.
And I love how you thought about it like inputs and outputs. Like how is the information coming in, but how are the students going to produce and create? And like you just said, they could do it in a Google Doc, a Google site, so many different ways, and giving them that choice as well.
So, have you found any big roadblocks? You are clearly very knowledgeable about all of this, but when you're sharing this information with teachers, what are some of the roadblocks that maybe you have come across?
The first thing definitely on top of the many roadblocks they're going to encounter is definitely preparation and time. Okay, this takes time. Designing a differentiated learning, having a differentiated learning design actually takes time. You cannot like have a differentiated learning design today and implement it tomorrow. It actually takes time. So if a teacher or a school adopts a differentiated learning design, they really have to sit down on it and actually plan for it. Okay, and this should also be done in a more institutional level. Although of course, initiators from the school, like one teacher or two teachers, can actually do this, but having it at an institutional level actually helps because one, your curriculum is set up to actually allow you to do this. Most curriculums do not allow this. If your curriculum is too content heavy, teachers do not have time to do differentiated learning design because they're too preoccupied catching up with the content to be delivered in the classroom. Okay, so somehow if it's done in an institutional level, you reduce the content of your curriculum, okay, somehow no, to allow for time for a more differentiated approach. Okay, so that's the biggest roadblock, no, time and preparation, Tara.
And I like that you did talk about curriculum because I do see that as a huge barrier for teachers. We have all these different curriculums, and then it's that one size kind of fits all, and they forget or they run out of time maybe to differentiate. I never really thought about it that way, but that is kind of true.
Yes, that's based on our experience. No matter how we try, there will always be successful stories of differentiation in the classroom.
Mhm.
But some point, we always reach a roadblock. We can no longer proceed because the curriculum is right there stopping us from proceeding. And of course, with the lack of administrator support, that's also going to be very, very hard for the teacher.
That's 100%. I was reaching out to some teachers just the other day and saying, give me some summer projects. What would you like me to work on over the summer? And one of the things that they were talking about was for me to support modifying some assessments for them so that they would be ready for them throughout the school year next year, because they couldn't get their assessments just weren't good for everyone. So, that was one of the summer projects that my teachers were actually asking for me to do for them. So it's right in line with that. Exactly what you were saying. So great. Thank you so much for that.
And then going on to topic number 2 or tip number 2, that contextual learning design. Let's go into more detail about what that might look like.
This is what I got. Well, particularly in training teachers. Okay, I realized that when I was training teachers 2 years ago, when I started Kaagapay Teacher Support, of course, the first reference would be development from other countries, such for example, the U.S., Singapore, Finland. When we talk about like educational pedagogies, strategies, and approaches. And I realized, okay, that whenever I discuss these things, teachers don't actually pick it up right away. And one of the key components on why these topics are actually not in a way being appreciated by the teachers here is that they don't actually feel connected to it. Okay, there's no that connection. Okay, because these are like lifted and copy pasted from other countries and does not actually talk about what's actually happening in the Philippines. Okay, so what we did was to start designing training programs that are actually answering what's happening on the ground. Okay, what our Filipino teachers are experiencing, what's actually happening in the classroom, what's the classroom to student ratio, what's the teacher student ratio, what's the problem with the curriculum in the Philippines, okay, what are the policy errors in the Philippines as well. So those are the things we considered. Okay? So in this manner, Steph, we realize that context, okay, whenever you approach as or designing instruction or learning design, is that you have to think about as from the design learning perspective, okay, you have to think about your users, okay, where they are, what they're smelling,
Mhm.
what they're thinking, how they're what they're seeing at the moment, all of those things, okay. The way games are designed, okay, that's the reason why games are so addicting because those are particularly designed for the users, okay. So applying that in the context of education, okay, if you design something for the students, okay, and you actually think about their actual context and you sort of like empathize with them, then you start designing something that actually works for them. Okay, because if you, from the get-go you have not considered your students from the learning design, then you don't expect the learning design to actually work
Mhm.
for them. But at the very core, if you start designing something for them, then almost automatically and naturally it works for them. They get to engage with it because they feel it's for them. That basically that's the feeling, no, Steph. Whenever you design something and you thought about your students when you design that, your students automatically feel it was designed for them. It's this is
Mhm.
mine. It's like I belong to this particular activity or assessment. So that's always been the consideration when we're thinking about contextualized learning design.
Yeah, I really like that one. And I kind of feel like that one goes with your tip number 5, that relationship and rapport building. Like you really got to know your students. And so how are some ways that you get to know your students to be able to create that learning design that's personalized exactly for their needs?
Thanks so much for that. Now, there are a couple of
Mhm.
ways to go about building rapport and relationship. Of course, we have to be very careful, by the way, teachers, no, because relationship is a very there's a like a thin gray area right there that we don't want to cross. Okay. Of course, our professionalism should always be to be considered whenever we do this. But when we talk about relationship here, Steph, we have to define it in a way that we're talking about building a connection. It's not necessarily that like relationship of just getting or knowing by the person by the name. Okay, it's actually bridging that creating that connection that allows you to like really see your students beyond just being a mere student. Okay, like what their likes are, dislikes, okay, or preferences, etc. Although it might take time, especially not in a large size class, but these are definitely doable. Okay, so one thing is that a teacher should always have like an open communication. Okay, a teacher that's open enough to create conversations with students. So what I usually do, I set up like a consultation time period, okay, via Google Calendar. So I really make use of appointments via Google Calendar step. So really Google
Mhm.
Workspace. A lot of Google Workspace tools are involved in my teaching career. So I do set that up so that students can easily jump into my Google Calendar and set up an appointment to talk about things, okay, about their class or maybe something else that impacts or affects their performance in class. Okay, and I also do some annotation, so it's not always written, but I'm very sensitive in terms of anecdotes in class. Okay, some events happening in the class. Okay, because eventually those things can help you decide on things whenever you think about the students, okay, how they're behaving in class, choices that they make in class, those little things, okay, can actually later on come in, no, and help you decide better on what kind of activities you're going to give them. Do you group them with high performer class, or do you group them with with mid performer classmates? It's etc. So those things would actually come in. So being very observant in your class profile actually helps as well. Okay, and of course that constant curiosity about your class actually helps as well. Okay, never be not curious about your class. Okay, always ask about them. Okay, your students are very soft when well, of course there will always be a wall at first. Okay, and we should never be discouraged by the walls that we encounter at first. Okay, that's usually the first thing you're going to encounter. But once you're through with the wall, it's an open field of information that you can use as an educator to design a learning design that actually thinks of the students.
So would you say that wall is probably your roadblock when you're thinking about building rapport and establishing those connections?
Yes and no in a way, Tara. It's a roadblock, but since I'm aware of it, that's something that I can easily persist to go through with. Okay? And I actually also continue to design things or approach it in a more consistent basis to be able to get over that wall eventually. And in most cases, at me, we're talking about like 95% of the time, that wall will eventually crumble, and you'll have access to that relationship we're looking for.
Do you usually see that learning go up when you have that wall come down?
Not in a consistent basis, Tara, but there's a very positive impact of creating those relationships. Okay? Well, for one, having that kind of relationship or connection with your students allows you to assist the student better. The student opens up more about what things they can and cannot do in the class, and allows you to intervene right away. In most cases, that's one of the challenges to teachers. They can't help because they actually don't know what's going on. But once the student opens up, they have more ways and proper timing to actually open up or intervene with the students. Okay? But in also other cases, Tara, it's not as always. It's not like evident. Okay? Because we have to also consider that aside from those, there are also other things that actually impact learning as well, such as, for example, home conditions also would impact. And we have a very high profile students here in our schools, and family is also a very very big factor as well.
So many factors, and so in our school district, we are over 60 languages right now. So we have 14 schools just within our district. So we are seeing so many of those components that come together, from socioeconomic background to culture to even just the placement of where you live in the town, because we're such a large district. And so we are really differentiating, and really our relationships really do matter in getting to know these students, because you might have one student sitting next to another student that are completely different, have no similarities in their backgrounds whatsoever. So that's huge in our district, as well as getting to know those kids, because we do have so many differences.
Mhm.
That's definitely a challenge, Tara. Language.
So, looking at authentic tasks and assessments, like this one is one that clearly stands out to me. I have a son that's 17 years old, and he's always questioning, how does this apply to my life? What am I going to do with this after school? Do I even, like, Mom, I don't even need to learn that. I don't need to study, because once I'm done with high school, I am never going to need it again. I want them to teach me how to do my taxes. So authentic tasks is something my son brings up all the time. Can you tell us how you think you're bringing that learning into your classroom?
Yes, exactly what you've said, Tara. You've explained well about what authentic task is all about. It's about asking why you're teaching what you're teaching right now. Okay, and well, as a kid, no, as I also experienced that, I also question what my teachers are teaching. How can I apply this? How can I use this? So what we do here in our school, for example, no, is that we are adopting the PBL framework or the project based learning framework for our school in order to anchor our assessments in a more authentic real life situations. Okay? So we always start with projects that actually answers real life issues and challenges and problems. Okay? Community issues, for example. So those are the things that we prioritize, okay, in our school. And and having authentic tasks actually answers the question of your son, Tara. Okay, how and where can we apply this? Although one of the things that when we tried doing this, because it's so easy to think about, not really easy, but it's really doable, okay, to think about assessments that are anchored on real life situations. Okay, but the problem
Mhm.
that we have encountered while we are pursuing the project-based learning in here in our school, and actually even in the Philippines, in general, is that we do have standardized tests. That's one of the major roadblock on pursuing more authentic tasks. Okay, because every time we try to do um to be deviant from the curriculum, so that we can pursue more authentic tasks, okay, we will always be pulled, okay, by the standardized test, because there are like targeted contents, targeted skills that we have to first do and accomplish. Okay, but overall, based on our experience, okay, based on the PBLs we have implemented so far. We have been doing PBL even before the pandemic. In 5 years' time, we actually saw more interest from our students, okay, because they actually get because one of the things that PBL, for example, and more authentic tasks, no, are actually able to promote is that not only that they are able to apply their knowledge and skills in a real life situations, okay, they also have the concept of student agency, which allows them to have more voice and choice in the way the pacing, the instruction is going on, even the assessments. Okay? And in that, we actually saw more interest and participation from our students, okay? Because they actually felt that what they're doing actually makes sense. Okay. Say for example, one of our PBL was anchored on our program called because we have a program here in our school that we're in. We bring our students for 6 weeks to China for an immersion. Okay. And what they did, no, the PBL team, or the students who went to China, was to design a a sustainable city. So they observe Beijing, collect data from Beijing, and then talk with the officials in Beijing. And then when they went back to the Philippines, okay, they applied all the concepts they have like learned about Beijing and how to construct a sustainable city. And they actually proposed that to a local government here in the Philippines. They actually, it makes sense, okay? Because why would they like to know about sustainability or urbanization, urban planning, and then you realize, yes, it actually makes sense because it actually impacts lives of people if proper urban planning is done, impacts of urbanization, and even sustainability of processes, no, in their community. So that's how authentic tasks eventually impacts the learning design.
That
What
is
a
not
yeah.
that's like nothing short of amazing. I mean, I'm kind of in awe right now. I'm
I
like,
know. I'm like, man,
that's amazing.
like what an experience for your students,
Oh,
to be able to go to China and then come back to the local government and propose something after looking and creating, like, that is amazing. And how much engagement you probably had. I would love to see that and come with you to do that project next year.
invite us, invite us.
Yes,
I know,
definitely. We will do.
right?
We will on our
So
next PBL.
what
Yep.
were the ages of the students that did that?
This one is actually our grade 12 students, because we have actually three China programs. Okay, we have for grade 8, for grade 10, and for grade 12. And actually, all of them actually did PBL. Okay, I only make an example for the grade 12 students. It's actually roughly around, we're looking at 15, 16 years old students, okay, who are preparing for college, university life already.
What a great experience.
Yes, I agree. All right. So I know we kind of talked about rapport. So we're going to go to our last one, which is that technology infused instructional material. How do you use this to engage your learners?
This one, well, primarily I thought of it because with the realization that we have students who are digital natives, okay, not necessarily digital citizens, okay, but they are digital natives. They were born in the age of technology. So that's the first maybe connection point that we can make with our students, okay, to meet them where they are. And since they are immersed in a world of technology, why not use technology? Okay, of course, there's always like apprehensions or sometimes doubts on the use of technology. But actually, by actually integrating it properly into our learning design, it actually worked for us. Okay? I've recently done something really I'm really proud of what I did last time. Just this one on my preparation because I'm a class advisor. So, and as a class advisor, we have to decorate our classrooms as usual. We have to prepare for our students. Okay? But I realized that when I decorate the classroom, it actually it takes so much time, like putting all the things, but you are not able to put all the information that for your students. Okay? So what I did was to simply design the board in a very simple manner. Okay, with a simple quotation and with a simple design. Okay, I made in Canva. Okay, and then what I did was to put a QR code in that bulletin board, and that QR code says on the side, "Scan me for the digital bulletin board." So instead of like creating like a big bulletin board and like wasting all the paper and all the materials I have to use, that QR code actually brings them to our digital bulletin board that contains all information about our class. You're talking about the subject teacher's information, class rules and protocols, even reply slips whenever they have to submit reply slips for memos or letters I'm sending to them, and all other things, calendar. I also put up a class calendar so that all deadlines are properly calendared, okay, for my students. Case all of the information in one scan of a QR code. Okay, so I think that's one way of how technology actually works for us. Okay, on how we can actually it actually works in facilitating things for, well, regardless if it's academics or formation for our students, and so many more. With technology, you can actually create more dynamic, more interactive presentations, instructional materials. Okay? And there's so many technology we can explore right now. No, there's actually an overwhelming amount of technology. But I always tell teachers, okay, whenever I talk about technology integrations, that never use them for the sake of using it. So I always teach my teachers here in the Philippines whenever we have training to create a technology integration playlist wherein they list down their most used and most favorite tech tools. No? Because I always remind them it's not about how many you're using, but how you're using them. So I may have, for example, I will always challenge them. I may know only like one or two tools, but I can tell you I can use it in 100 ways more than you, and that's what technology integration is all about. So that's it.
I love your bulletin board idea because if you need to make a change on one of those deadlines or change something out, it's so easy. You don't need to go to the copier, you don't need to go laminate it, you don't need to find a stapler. You can just change that
Yes,
link and that's it. That's such a good
yes,
idea.
I can easily just like tell them, oh, visit our digital bulletin board. I have new announcements, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No printing, no whatsoever that I have to do.
So, is that being implemented now, like next week when you start school? So
Yes,
you'll
I
be
have.
see, maybe you'll be able to come back and tell us how much the students like it next time.
Yeah, I will. I will definitely share some insights about it and how my students and even my parents will, the parents of my students will actually react because I'll be sharing it with the parents as well so that they also have information about what's going on in our class.
I love it. So many good tips. Oh, this was so much fun. I'm over here taking notes and everything. I love it. Thank you for your insights and sharing some stories with us. We really appreciate you being here today and taking the time, knowing that you're getting ready to start school again. That's taking time away from that. So we appreciate that you have been here.
Welcome, Tara. I just can't say no to Steph also. Steph has been very, very supportive of our community regardless of time difference. And I really appreciate that. So when Steph asked me, it was an automatic yes.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you
I
so
learned
much.
so much and I just appreciated all of the different tips because I was kind of, like, yes, build relationships, but that differentiation, that authentic and using like all of those together, it just like was very eye-opening to me. So I appreciate you sharing with our listeners all of those different tips and tricks to engage their learners.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Steph.
You're welcome. And our call to action today is if you like, share, comment on the episode, share the episode out because we want to spread Franco's tips all over the place. So don't forget to share our episode and like it and leave us a review if you like. And until next time, control the chaos.
Thanks for listening to Control the Chaos EDU. Check out the description for show notes.
We look forward to connecting with you on social media. Subscribe to the weekly podcast so you never miss an episode. Control the chaos. Until next time.